The rain had stopped hours ago, but the world still smelled like morning. Wet earth, fading flowers, and that strange metallic scent of sorrow that hung heavy in the air. I stood beside the wooden bench just outside the chapel, my hands buried deep in my coat pockets, watching people trickle away from Thomas's funeral. Most of them were strangers, distant family members, caregivers, and a few old neighbors I barely recognized. But none of them, not one, knew Thomas the way I did. We had shared 60 years of friendship, of silence, of stubbornness and laughter, and the kind of unspoken love that only comes from two people who have seen each other at their worst and stayed. When the crowd was gone and the silence felt safe, I stepped back inside the chapel. His casket was still there, the flowers now wilting. On the front pew, someone had left a small, sealed envelope. My name was written in Thomas's familiar handwriting, sharp, slanted, and with that same inconsistent pressure he'd always had. I hesitated, then picked it up. The envelope was thin. Inside, there was no letter, no explanation, just a single cold brass key, old, worn, heavy for its size. I turned it over in my palm, half expecting some note to be hidden beneath it. But there was nothing, only a scribbled line inside the envelope for the things I never said. That was it. No address, no instructions, no lock. Just a key. That night, I couldn't sleep. The key lay on my nightstand, catching moonlight like it was made of something sacred. I kept staring at it, wondering what secrets Thomas had taken with him, and whether this was his way of telling me something he never could in words. We'd grown up together in the same neighborhood, enlisted in the army on the same day, survived the same war, loved the same woman once, though neither of us ever admitted it. We were friends by proximity at first, then by choice, and then by necessity. Over time, Thomas became the closest thing I had to a brother, and now he was gone, and he left me a key. By morning, I knew I had to follow it, to find where it belonged, to understand why. My first stop was Thomas's house. The place had been sealed by the time I got there, a cold blue notice taped across the door by the estate executor. It would take weeks to get permission to enter, but I didn't need the house. I needed memory. So I walked back through the old streets, past the diner we used to sneak out to as teenagers, past the field where we once fought over nothing and laughed until we couldn't breathe. Each corner carried echoes. And then I found myself in front of the old workshop. It had been abandoned for decades, just a small wooden building with a rusted sign that read, Willow Street Repairs. We had worked there one summer in our 20s, fixed bicycles, radios, old clocks. It was the only place where Thomas ever looked like he belonged. The door creaked open with surprising ease. Dust and time had claimed the place, but the bones were still there. Tools hung on the walls like sleeping memories. Shelves bowed under the weight of forgotten parts. And at the back, a small safe. I almost didn't see it, hidden behind a stack of rusted toolboxes. The key slipped into the lock like it had been waiting. Click. My heart stalled. Inside was a small notebook, wrapped in cloth. I opened it slowly, fingers trembling. The first page held one sentence, written in Thomas's unmistakable hand. If you found this, then I owe you the truth. The next page began, there's more than one lock, old friend, and this key is only the first. I sat down right there on the cold concrete floor. I had no idea what he meant, but I knew this was just the beginning. The notebook rested on my lap like it carried more weight than its pages could possibly hold. My fingers brushed over the cloth cover as if Thomas might still feel it. Somewhere, I reread the last line of the first message. There's more than one lock, old friend, and this key is only the first. I looked at the key again, still heavy, still cold, still silent. It hadn't changed, but I had. I left the workshop just as the sun was beginning to fall behind the clouds again, casting everything in that soft gray that blurs the line between memory and reality. I didn't go home. I walked. My feet led me not by direction, but by emotion. That strange magnetism that grief gives to familiar places. I passed the corner store where we used to buy licorice, the tree we carved our names into, the bus stop where he'd once kissed her, just once, just quickly, when he thought no one was watching. But I was, and I never forgot. Then before I could brace for it, I was standing in front of the house. The one we promised never return to. It had once been yellow. Now the paint peeled in sunburnt flakes, and the garden was overrun with weeds that clutched at the rusted gate. The mailbox hung on by one nail, and the windows stared back like eyes that had seen too much. I hadn't been here since the night it all went wrong. I don't even remember who said the words first. We're never coming back here. But I remember the silence that followed, heavy, final, the kind that feels like closing a chapter mid-sentence. I stood there a long while. The key in my pocket burned. Then I stepped through the gate. The door wasn't locked. That somehow was worse. Inside, the air smelled like dust and old wood. But beneath it all was something else, the faintest trace of her perfume, like lavender left in a drawer for too long. She, Elena. The name was still a wound. Thomas and I, well, we were young and stupid and selfish. We both loved her, but she chose him, and he never asked me to forgive him for it. Maybe he thought I had. Maybe I thought I had too. But this house held echoes. Of the three of us laughing on that green couch, of her singing in the kitchen, of Thomas and me drinking on the porch, pretending we weren't pretending. I walked slowly through the rooms. Each step disturbed memories like dust. And then I found it. A chest, small, wooden, tucked beneath the staircase where she used to leave her shoes. The key fit. It turned with a low click that felt like it unlocked more than wood. Inside there were letters. Dozens, all addressed to me, all written by Thomas, none ever sent. The first one was dated the week after she died. I know you hate me. I don't blame you, but I miss you more than I know how to write. The second, a year later, I drove past your house today, almost knocked, didn't. The third, I found the photo of us, the one with the canoe and the ridiculous hats. God, we were idiots. I miss that. Each letter was a confession, a crack in the armor he always wore. Words I never thought he had the courage to write, let alone feel. By the 10th letter, I was crying, not because of what he wrote, but because of what I had never said back. I sat there until the sun set, the house growing colder with every shadow. And when I stood, something fell from the lid of the chest. Another key, smaller, silver, attached to a note that read, "The box in the attic. You'll know it when you see it." He had left me another path, another memory to unearth, another part of himself to find. The silver key weighed less in my hand, but somehow it carried more. Maybe it was the letters. Maybe it was the house. Maybe it was the ghost of a promise broken decades ago, now resurrected in ink and dust, in the faint scent of lavender that still haunted the corners of that place. I walked out of the house slowly, the chest of letters left behind but not forgotten. I had taken the key and the note with me. I didn't need anything else. Not yet. The box in the attic. You'll know it when you see it. Thomas's voice echoed in my mind as if he had whispered it himself. His handwriting had always carried his voice with it, clipped, precise, a little impatient. But this time it felt softer, like he had finally laid down his guard. The attic, a place where old things went to be forgotten. But that wasn't what this was. He didn't want to be forgotten. I came back the next morning with a flashlight, gloves, and the quiet determination of someone who no longer feared what he might find. The key was tucked into my breast pocket, where I could feel its outline against my chest. The attic stairs creaked beneath my weight, each step a new hesitation. The smell hit me first: mildew, old books, something sweet and rotten, like decaying paper. But beneath that was something else, something like cedar wood, preserved, protected. I turned the flashlight on. The beam danced across cobwebs and trunks and forgotten boxes. Dolls' missing eyes, old wedding gowns folded into brittle lace, paintings wrapped in cloth. Each item was a remnant of a life paused and never resumed. And then I saw it. In the farthest corner, beneath a slanted beam where even the sunlight struggled to reach, was a box unlike the others. Not cardboard, not plastic. It was made of dark oak, reinforced with iron corners, and bearing a brass lock at its center, aged but intact. My fingers went to the key. It fit and turned. The box clicked open. Inside, there were more letters. But these weren't addressed to me. They were addressed to her, to Elena. My throat tightened as I reached for the first one. The paper was thinner, the ink more faded, the handwriting less controlled. These were older. The first one dated back to 1967, the year she died. Elena, I don't know if this will ever reach you, but I can't stop talking to you in my head. So maybe writing will help. Maybe it won't. I still see your hair on the pillow. I still hear your voice in the kitchen. I still remember how you touched his shoulder instead of mine. His shoulder, mine. I read another. Today he came by. He didn't speak, just left flowers on your grave and walked away. I wanted to stop him, to tell him you loved him once too, but I didn't. I never did. And another. I wish I'd been enough. I wish we both had been. I sat back on my heels. My breath came ragged. These were not love letters, not in the traditional sense. They were full of longing, of guilt, of confusion and bitterness twisted with tenderness. They weren't about winning her heart. They were about losing themselves. In the bottom of the box, wrapped in a silk scarf, was a photograph. The three of us, on the porch of this very house. I was holding a lemonade. Thomas had his arm around me. Elena sat in between us, laughing at something neither of us remembered. I hadn't seen that photo in over 50 years. On the back, in her handwriting, "My two favorite men, please don't let this break you." But it had. For years. I placed the letters back into the box gently, like they might shatter. Then I noticed a small envelope taped to the inside of the lid. I peeled it off, hands shaking. It wasn't addressed to anyone. Just a single line on the outside. "If you've made it this far, then you're ready for the truth." Inside was a small map. Hand-drawn, rough, but familiar. It led back to the workshop, specifically beneath the floorboards. I returned just before dusk. The air was cooler now, the light more forgiving. I brought a crowbar and a crow's curiosity. In the workshop, everything was just as I left it, but the floorboard marked with a faint X, clearly aged but unmistakable, waited. The board groaned as I pried it up. Beneath it was a compartment no bigger than a shoebox. And inside, another box. This one made of tin, locked, without a key. Instead, it had a dial, a combination lock. I stared at it for a long time. No numbers came to mind. Then I remembered the photo. The year she wrote on the back, 1960. I turned the dial 1964. Click. It opened. Inside was a cassette tape, labeled in Thomas's handwriting, "Play me only when you're alone." And below it, one last note. "Some things I could never say to your face, but I hope you will understand why." This is where the real story begins. I sat down on the floor of the workshop, the tape cradled in my hands. It was far from over. In fact, it had just begun. The cassette tape sat in my hands like a secret with weight. I turned it over again and again, wondering what his voice would sound like after all these years. Would it be cracked and weary like mine? Would it hesitate, or would it speak plainly as Thomas always did? Except, of course, when it mattered most. The note was still in my breast pocket. "Play me only when you are alone." I obeyed. That night, I dug through an old drawer in my garage until I found an ancient cassette player. The kind with big, clunky buttons and a speaker that crackled even when it was off. I dusted it off, fed it fresh batteries, and sat in the quiet of my living room with only the sound of the wind against the windows. And then I pressed play. Click, then silence. Then Thomas's voice. "If you're hearing this, it means I'm dead," which is weird because I always thought I'd outlive you. I laughed, too suddenly, too loudly. Then the ache returned. "I didn't know how to say any of this to your face. I'm not sure I ever had the courage. So I guess I'm doing the coward's thing, talking to you from the grave. But I need you to know a few things. I need you to hear the truth." There was a pause. I could hear his breath. "You remember the upstairs room in my house, the one I always kept locked?" Of course I remembered. I had asked about it only once. He had said it was storage and changed the subject. "Go there. Use the silver key, the one you found in Elena's box. There's something you need to see." The tape clicked. End of message. I sat frozen, the hum of the player still echoing. The room. He had left something there. Morning couldn't come fast enough. I didn't sleep. I watched the sky lighten through the cracks in my curtains, every hour feeling like a stone dragged through me. As soon as the sun breached the trees, I grabbed the key and drove. Thomas's house stood like a memory too big to forget. Familiar but unfamiliar. Grief did that. It twisted the edges of what used to be, made everything both sharp and blurry. I unlocked the front door and climbed the stairs slowly. I paused at the top, staring at the narrow hallway that ended in the door I had never opened. It was plain, unassuming, but it held weight. I slid the silver key into the lock. It turned, and the door creaked open. The room was nothing like I expected. No storage, no dust-covered boxes or forgotten furniture. Instead, it was almost empty. A single armchair by the window. A bookshelf, half filled, meticulously organized. A small desk with an old radio. And on the wall, dozens of photographs. All of me. Different ages. Different seasons. Me on my porch. Me laughing at some forgotten party. Me sitting alone on a park bench. Some looked recent. Others, decades old. All of them candid. All of them taken by someone who knew me well enough to capture my unguarded moments. I stepped closer. My knees felt weak, my breath unsteady. Pinned beneath one photo was a note. "You were my only family. I never knew how to say it." And next to it, another box. This one unlocked. Inside was a journal. I opened it. Page after page of Thomas's handwriting. It was a log of sorts. Entries written over years, each one a window into the heart of a man I thought I knew. He doesn't talk about Elena anymore. I wonder if he blames me less with time. He brought me soup today, didn't say much, but he stayed. That means more than he'll ever know. Sometimes I imagine what it would have been like if I had chosen to leave, if I had disappeared after she died. But then I remember his face that day. I couldn't do it. I turned the pages slowly, each one a revelation, each one a confession. There were no grand admissions of guilt, no shocking secrets, just love. The kind that sits quietly in the background, the kind that waits for you to notice. At the back of the journal was one final note. There's one more key, one more door, the hardest one. You'll find it where we first learned what it meant to lose. I didn't need a map. I knew exactly where he meant. The tree by the lake, where we scattered her ashes, where we never spoke again for 3 years. He wanted me to go back, to finish this. The road to the lake was unchanged, as if time itself had chosen to avoid that stretch of land. The dirt path still wound its way past the tall reeds, and the sound of water lapping against the rocks whispered with the same softness it did the day we said goodbye to her. But even as the setting remained untouched, everything inside me had shifted. My legs ached more now. My hands trembled just slightly. The grief I had buried beneath decades of silence and routine had clawed its way back to the surface. Raw, restless, and as real as the breeze that rustled through the willow branches overhead. I stood at the edge of the lake by the tall willow tree whose limbs had long since bowed with time. We had stood here once, Thomas and I, on the day we let her go. Neither of us spoke. We simply scattered Elena's ashes into the water and walked away in opposite directions, never turning back. That silence had lasted 3 years, and now I had returned to the scene of that wordless farewell, carrying the weight of a letter and a question. What did Thomas still need me to find? The leaves crunched underfoot as I stepped closer to the trunk. My gaze scanned the base of the tree, eyes adjusting to the dappled light breaking through the branches. And then I saw it, a stone, smooth and rounded, sitting atop a patch of earth, too clean, too deliberate. I crouched, brushing it aside with care. Beneath it, a wooden box emerged, its corners softened by age, its grain darkened by years of exposure to the elements. No lock, no latch, just a lid. My fingers hesitated before lifting it, as if they knew the contents would rearrange the past I thought I understood. Inside was a single envelope. No name, no address, just the familiar loops and sharp angles of Thomas's handwriting across the front. I opened it slowly, my hands betraying the steadiness my face was trying to maintain. I didn't know who to write this to. Maybe it's to both of us, maybe it's to neither. Maybe it's just for the air between us, the place where everything we never said still lingers. I loved her. You did too. We never fought about it, not really, but maybe that was the problem. We swallowed it, both of us, like it was something we had to earn or deserve or apologize for. You were the better man, I always thought. Stronger, calmer, more kind. I never told you that, did I? You were the one she would have chosen if life had given her more time. I saw it in the way she looked at you when you weren't watching. But she stayed, and I stayed, and you left. And the space you left behind never filled, not really. I wanted to be enough for her, for you, but I wasn't. And instead of fixing that, I built a wall around it. A wall made of silence and jokes and shared drinks and mornings where we pretended the past didn't exist. But it did, it always did. So here it is, the letter with no name, because I don't know if it's a confession or an apology, maybe both, maybe neither. I just hope when you read this, you remember that I loved you too. Not the way I loved her, but in the way two brothers love each other without ever needing to say it. You were my family, and I never wanted to lose you again. But sometimes we lose each other not in one grand moment, but in 1,000 little silences. I know I let too many of them grow between us, and I know I can't ask you to forgive all of them. But if you've made it this far, if you're reading this under that willow tree, then I think maybe you already have. Or maybe you're trying, and that's enough. The air seemed to pause around me, holding its breath. My eyes traced the last words on the page again and again, even as the ink blurred through my tears. I wasn't sobbing, just silent. The kind of silence that wraps around you when someone finally says the words you've been needing to hear your whole life. I folded the letter with aching tenderness and pressed it to my chest. For a long time, I sat there at the base of the tree, letting the sound of the water soothe the ache in my ribs, letting the wind carry my forgiveness into the branches above. I could have stayed there all day, maybe all week, but I knew I wasn't finished. Not yet. As I moved to return the letter to the box, I noticed something odd about the interior. A faint line, a shallow seam, suggesting a false bottom. My fingers slid underneath the lining and pried it up carefully. There it was. Another key. This one was different. Sleek, black, modern. Next to it was a small, folded slip of paper with only one line. Storage unit number 41, Eastbrook Road. Another place, another door, another part of the truth. I rose slowly, my knees stiff but my resolve steady. The letter with no name had given me more than closure. It had given me permission to grieve, to remember, to keep going. And now it was time to discover what waited in the shadows of storage unit number 41. The address was still etched into my memory. Eastbrook Road, storage unit number 41. I didn't need the slip of paper. I knew the place well enough. It sat on the outskirts of town, flanked by tired fences and weather-worn signage. The kind of place people went to forget or to hide what they couldn't carry anymore. But what had Thomas hidden here? What could possibly be left that hadn't already unraveled in letters and keys, in photographs and silence? It was raining again when I arrived. The kind of rain that wasn't loud or angry, just persistent, like grief that hadn't finished speaking. I stepped from my car, the black key cold in my pocket. The scent of damp concrete and rust greeted me. The manager didn't ask questions when I showed the key and mentioned Thomas's name. Just handed me a clipboard, a nod, and pointed down the corridor. Unit 41. The lock clicked open with a sound more intimate than I expected, like a sigh. I pushed the door upward, revealing a space swallowed by dimness and dust. But this wasn't just storage. This was a sanctuary. Inside, I found a world I never knew existed. The air smelled of cedar and old leather, and the room was organized with precision. No clutter, no forgotten junk, just carefully placed objects that seemed to pulse with memory. A wooden desk sat at the far end, beside a chair with a cushion that had clearly been used. On the desk were files, notebooks, even newspaper clippings, all labeled with my name. A photograph of me at my retirement party, a copy of the speech I gave at my wife's funeral, articles about the war memorial I helped build, even sketches, detailed pencil drawings of moments I had forgotten, me helping a child fix a bike, me asleep on a park bench, me standing in the pouring rain, staring at a closed cafe. Thomas had been watching, not in a way that felt invasive, but protective, present, always. I opened one of the drawers. Inside were cassette tapes, more than I could count, each labeled with a date. Some went back 20 years, others only months. A recorder rested beside them. My hand hovered above it, unsure. Then I pressed play. Thomas's voice filled the room once more. He looked tired today, sat on the bench for 40 minutes, didn't touch his coffee. I think he's still grieving. I wish I could help, but I don't know how. Another click. He laughed today. Real laughter. It made me tear up. God, I've missed that sound. Each recording is a journal, a spoken memory, not of Thomas's life, but of mine. The walls of the unit were lined with shelves, and on one, I found a box marked regrets. Inside were sealed letters, each addressed to people I recognized only faintly. Names from the past, family members he'd lost touch with, people he'd hurt or abandoned, even a letter addressed to Elena's sister. But the one that stopped me was the envelope marked simply, me. I opened it. You probably found this last, and I guess that's how it had to be. I've spent most of my life trying to understand you, trying to forgive myself through you. I watched you age, watched you survive everything we couldn't say, and it humbled me. You were always braver than me, even when I pretended otherwise. This place, this room, it's not just a tribute to you. It's what I couldn't say out loud. It's what I hoped you'd understand when I was gone. I loved you, old friend. I really did. And it breaks me to think I let that go unspoken for so long. But maybe now, in these tapes and letters and photos, you'll hear it clearly. You mattered more to me than I ever told you. And if there's anything left in you that still carries anger, I hope this space gives you permission to put it down. Thank you for seeing me, for staying even in silence. I sat in the chair for hours, listening, reading, remembering. Each artifact in the room was like a thread connecting us, not just as friends, but as two flawed, frightened men who had tried in their own ways to love and be loved. I had come to this storage unit expecting closure, but what I found instead was a beginning, because only now did I realize how little I had known Thomas. Not for lack of effort, but because we had both been too afraid. Too hard, too proud of him. I looked around the room and saw not just his memory, but his vulnerability, his yearning, his quiet devotion. He had spent his final years building this place, not to be remembered, but to be known. I picked up another cassette, pressed play. His voice returned, steady and familiar. I don't know if he'll ever find this place, but if he does, I hope it tells him everything I couldn't. It did, and more. The air inside the storage unit was still, the kind of stillness that follows revelation. I sat there with the cassette player resting on my lap, Thomas's voice echoing faintly from the last tape I had played. My eyes were dry, but my chest ached, full of the weight that only understanding can bring. I looked at the pile of cassettes beside me, each marked with dates, carefully labeled in Thomas's sharp handwriting. I reached for the one at the top of the stack, labeled simply Elena, March 3rd, 1970. My hands trembled slightly as I slotted the tape into the recorder and pressed play. It's been 6 years, Thomas's voice began. 6 years, and I still don't know how to talk to you. Maybe I never did. His voice was younger here, softer, less guarded, a man in mourning. You'd be 32 this year. Sometimes I imagine what you'd look like now. Would your hair have grayed early like mine did? Would your laugh still echo in the kitchen the way it used to? God, I miss your laugh. He paused. I went to see him today. He left flowers, the yellow ones you hated, but I didn't tell him that. I couldn't. I just stood behind a tree and watched. Another long pause. He still walks like you matter. Like everything he does is for a future that included you once. I stopped the tape not because I wanted to, but because I needed to breathe. The words had a way of slipping beneath my skin, finding the parts of me I didn't know were still wounded. Thomas had spoken not just of Elena, but of me, again and again through the years. I picked up another tape, this one dated June 1982, The Bench. I pressed play. He sat on the bench for nearly an hour today. Didn't say a word, just stared out at the park. Kids ran past him, dogs barked, and he didn't flinch. I wanted to sit beside him, to say something, anything, but I didn't. The recorder clicked, then resumed. We're both getting older. I wonder if he feels it more than I do. He's always carried time like a burden. I've always tried to outrun it. Click. I wonder what would happen if I told him everything. If I handed him the box, the letters, the key. Would he forgive me? Would he understand? Or would he just walk away for good this time? I looked around the storage unit again. This place wasn't a shrine, it was a confession. Each object, each tape, each carefully preserved letter, it wasn't just about me. It was about Thomas, trying to find peace in the only way he knew how. I reached for one more cassette. This one looked older than the others. The label was faded, barely legible. Confession, do not play unless ready. I hesitated, then pressed play. If you're listening to this, then you've made it through everything else. You've read the letters, seen the photos, found the room. You know more about me now than anyone ever did. More than I was ever brave enough to say. But there's one truth I've kept locked away. Not because I was ashamed, but because I didn't know how it would change things. He took a shaky breath. Elena didn't just choose me. I asked her to. Silence. I asked her to stay with me. I begged her not to tell you about the night she came to my door. The night she cried in my arms, saying she didn't know who she loved more. I told her to choose me, even if it wasn't honest. I told her I couldn't survive if she didn't. My hand gripped the edge of the chair. She did it for me, out of pity, out of guilt. I don't know, but I think part of her heart always belonged to you, and I took that from both of you. I told myself it was love, that it was destiny, but it was fear, it was loneliness. He exhaled, the sound long and tired. I've lived with that for most of my life. I loved her. God, I loved her. But I loved you too, not in a way I ever understood, but in the way that made losing you the hardest thing I ever did. I ruined us, all three of us. And I spent the rest of my life building this room, these letters, these recordings, trying to give it all back, trying to let you see me, all of me. I'm sorry. The tape ended, and I just sat there, not angry, not broken, just still, because in that moment, I understood something I never had before. Thomas hadn't left me keys to unlock doors. He had left me keys to unlock the truth. And with each one, he had handed me a piece of his soul. The rain had returned by the time I stepped out of the storage unit, falling in soft, persistent sheets, soaking my coat and seeping into my bones. But I didn't rush. I let it wash over me, let it cling to my skin like memory, like truth. Thomas's voice still echoed in my head. The last tape, the confession. It had changed everything, or maybe it had simply confirmed what my heart had always suspected, but never dared to believe. I hadn't just lost Elena. We had all lost something that night. I didn't drive home. Instead, I found myself back at the house, his house. The upstairs room was dark, silent, but I couldn't sit still. The past was moving inside me now, ailing and unruly, and so I went where memory pulled me. The old town square, the park bench, the street light, where we last argued, and finally to the bar we used to frequent, long before grief built walls between us. The place was still there. Same cracked window, same flickering neon sign. Inside, the bartender didn't recognize me, but he didn't need to. I ordered a drink I hadn't tasted in 30 years and sat at a booth in the back, the same one we had once claimed as ours. I closed my eyes, and I remembered. It was winter, 1964, the night we both forgot. Forgot who we were, forgot what we meant to each other, forgot her. We had been drinking, not out of celebration, but out of ache. Elena had just left town, gone to visit her sister after an argument with Thomas. I hadn't seen her in weeks. He hadn't spoken to her in days. We sat in this very booth, drowning our pride in cheap whiskey and colder silence. Neither of us mentioned her name, but she was everywhere. In the space between our words, in the way we didn't meet each other's eyes, in the song that played too softly in the background, the one she loved, the one she used to hum while washing dishes. "You think she's coming back?" I finally asked. Thomas didn't answer at first. Then he said, "Not if she's smart." That made me laugh, a bitter, broken sound. "So you're giving up?" I never had her. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was loud. Loud with the things we weren't saying. That I still loved her. That he did too. That maybe she had loved both of us. Or neither. Or just the version of us that existed before everything got complicated. We drank more. Too much. We stumbled out into the snow, yelling nonsense and memories. At some point, we made it to the lake. Why the lake? I don't remember. Maybe because it was the one place we always felt like boys again. Like brothers. We sat beneath the old willow tree, the same one where we would one day scatter her ashes, still years away. And we talked, truly talked, about her smile, about our regrets, about how afraid we were to lose each other. Then we cried, both of us, like children. And then, nothing. I don't remember what came next. Just darkness, just cold. The night we both forgot. I opened my eyes. The bar was quieter now. A few people trickled in, laughed too loudly. I sipped my drink, now warm from neglect. I realized something, sitting there. That night had been our breaking point. And we had chosen to forget it. Not because it didn't matter, but because it mattered too much. It was the night we let guilt win. The night we buried our brotherhood beneath the weight of a woman we both loved and the pride we both refused to release. And now, decades later, Thomas had left me a map back to it all. To the truth, to him. I left the bar and returned to the lake. The willow tree stood tall in the dark, its branches swaying in the wind like arms reaching down to touch the past. I stood beneath it, and I whispered into the night, "I remember now." I closed my eyes, letting the cold wrap around me, letting the silence answer back. And in that stillness, I forgave him. Truly, fully, finally. Not just for what he took, but for the years he carried the guilt alone, and for the friend I almost lost forever. I returned to the storage unit one last time. There, waiting in the center of the room, was one final envelope. I hadn't seen it before, or maybe I hadn't been ready to. It was labeled "The End" or something like it. Inside was a photograph, the three of us, Elena, Thomas, and me, laughing, whole, and beneath it, one last note. If you've made it here, then maybe you understand now. Maybe we were never meant to be perfect. Maybe love was never about choosing. Maybe it was just about showing up, again and again, even when it hurt. Thank you for coming back. Thank you for remembering. I'll see you under the willow tree. The envelope lingered in my hand like a heartbeat, the words on its surface pulsing beneath my fingertips. The end, or something like it. And inside, a photograph, a moment I had forgotten or perhaps had never seen clearly enough to remember. We were all smiling. Elena was in the middle, her hair caught in a breeze, mouth open mid-laughter. Thomas stood on her right, his hand resting lightly on her shoulder. And me, I was on her left, holding a camera in one hand, the other hand unknowingly reaching toward her. A candid moment frozen in time, a memory that didn't carry the weight of sorrow yet. Just light, just joy. Under the photo, Thomas's final message, "I'll see you under the willow tree." But I wasn't ready to say goodbye. Not yet. I spent that night at the lake. I didn't plan to. I had no blanket, no food, no plan. Just myself and the rain-slicked soil beneath the willow tree. The wind murmured through the branches, low and rhythmic, like the breath of something older than regret. I watched the sky shift from night to morning, the stars slowly disappearing into a gray dawn. My bones ached. My back was sore. But for the first time in decades, I felt still, not empty, just still, like I had finally laid something down. When the sun rose, golden and slow, I stood and walked back to the car. There was one more place to go, the last door, the one that had waited longer than all the others, the one that had always been mine. The house I grew up in had long since been sold, repainted, remodeled. But the address was burned into my memory, as permanent as the lines on my palms. I didn't expect to find anything there. The new owners were strangers. The structure barely resembled the house of my childhood. But something told me, intuition, memory, or maybe just the echo of Thomas's voice, that this was where I needed to be. I stood across the street for a long time, staring at the place where my life began. The porch had been replaced. The windows were new, but the tree in the front yard, it was the same. Gnarled, tall, bent slightly to one side, as if still leaning into the past. I was about to turn away when a young woman stepped outside. She looked at me, curious but not unkind. "Can I help you?" she called. I hesitated, then crossed the street. "I grew up here," I said. Her eyes widened. "You're Mr. Avery?" I blinked. "Yes." She smiled gently. "There's something for you." She disappeared inside for a moment and returned with a box, small, wooden, familiar. It came years ago. A man dropped it off, said if anyone named Avery ever showed up, to give it to them. My breath caught. Thomas, of course. I thanked her, took the box, and returned to my car. I didn't open it until I was parked beneath the shade of an old oak tree 2 streets away. The lid lifted easily. Inside was a key and a letter. "This is the last one, I promise. You always said the house on Elbridge Street was the place you left your childhood behind. I think it was where you locked it away, all the love, all the hurt, all the questions, and all the answers you never thought you deserved. I found the key a long time ago. It was taped beneath your old bed frame, right where you left it. I kept it because I thought someday you'd want it back, that someday you'd be ready to open the door you closed when you were too young to know how to heal. The storage unit, the letters, the tapes, they were for us. But this door, Avery, this one is just for you. Whatever you find behind it, I hope it brings you peace. I'll be under the willow tree, waiting. T. I held the key. Not sleek, not black, just brass, old and worn, with the numbers 217 carved faintly into the base. I didn't know what it opened. Not really, but I knew where to go. There was a shed behind the house on Elbridge Street, forgotten by most, hidden behind vines and time. My father had used it as a workshop. My mother had used it for storage. I had used it once to escape the noise of a house that didn't know how to hold grief. It was still there. The door groaned as I approached. The key slid in like it had never left. The lock clicked, and the door opened. The air inside was thick with dust, but the light from the single window fell across a blanket-covered shape in the center of the room. I pulled it away. A trunk. My trunk. The one I had packed when I left for college. The one I had promised myself I'd never open again. I knelt, opened it. Inside were pieces of me. A journal from age 17. A mixtape Elena had made for me. A letter from my mother, never mailed. Photographs of Thomas and me, back when our laughter didn't echo with loss. And at the bottom, a note written in my own handwriting. Remember who you were. I sat on the floor and I read every page, every letter, every memory I had once buried. I let them rise, let them speak, let them hurt, and then let them go. By the time I returned to the lake, the sun was setting. The willow tree cast long shadows across the grass, golden light filtering through its leaves like forgiveness. I stood beneath it, the last key in my pocket, the last letter in my hand, and I whispered, I found it. I found me. And for the first time, I believed it. The sun was low over the lake when I returned, casting long amber shadows across the grass. The willow tree stood just as it always had, tall, quiet, patient. Its branches swayed in the wind like it was breathing, waiting. In my hand, I carried the last letter, not from Thomas, from me. I had written it that morning, after sitting on the floor of the shed, surrounded by the fragments of my younger self, surrounded by a past I had spent too long trying to forget. It wasn't a letter of anger, not anymore. It was something else entirely. A beginning, or an ending, or maybe finally both. I sat beneath the willow and unfolded the page. Dear Thomas, I used to think you were the reason I lost her. I carried that for too long. I let it rot in me, poison the way I looked at you, the way I looked at love. But the truth is, I never truly lost her. She was never mine to keep, just like she was never yours. She was her own, always. And we were too young, too broken, too afraid to know what to do with the kind of love that wasn't perfect. So we fought, not with fists, but with silence, with years, with distance. And maybe that was what hurt the most, not the losing, but the leaving. I've read every word you left behind, listened to your voice until it echoed louder than memory. You told me everything, except one thing. You never told me that you forgave me too, but I'm choosing to believe you did. Because in the end, all that's left is this: we loved, we failed, we remembered, and we kept showing up even when we didn't know how. That was enough. It still is. Your brother in all the ways that matter. A. I folded the letter and placed it at the base of the tree, securing it beneath a smooth stone, the same kind of stone I had once found there, marking a box, a memory, a truth. Then I stood, and I waited. Not for Thomas, but for peace. Weeks passed, then months. But the story didn't end, because something shifted in me. I started visiting the lake more often, not to mourn, but to remember. The people who came and went, young joggers, old couples walking hand in hand, often gave me strange looks. But some nodded, some smiled, some sat with me. I started talking about Thomas, about Elena, about what it means to lose someone before you learn how to love them and what it means to keep loving them anyway. People listened, and slowly I realized this wasn't just my story, it was everyone's. We all have someone we never said goodbye to properly. We all carry a letter we never mailed. We all leave behind a truth we never say out loud. One spring morning, I returned to the lake with a new bench. Carved into the backrest were the words, "For the friend who never left, even when I thought he had." And beneath it, a brass plaque, "In memory of Thomas R. Hale, I'll see you under the willow tree." I sat down, watched the wind dance through the leaves, and smiled. Because sometimes the doors we're most afraid to open don't lead to endings. They lead us home.